Feed Your Family Tonight podcast. Each week, we are serving up motivation and inspiration to help you get weeknight dinner on the table, letting you recapture a little calm in the crazy. And now, your host, speaker, author, and married mother of four, Mariefiebach.
Welcome to the Feed Your Family Tonight podcast, episode 123. I'm your host, Mariefiebach, and I am so happy to be here with you today. It is March 2021 when this is getting recorded, and spring is in the air here in Kansas. We've finally had some warm weather after record cold temperatures. I don't know about you, but when spring hits, I am usually ready to kind of freshen up our menus, do some spring cleaning. Spring cleaning is a real thing. There is just an energy that comes with spring. This past week, we finally had a day that was over 60 degrees and it was warm outside, and I grilled burgers for my family for the first time in months. My pickiest eater said, "Oh my goodness, this tastes so good, Mom. Thank you so much." Now, my kids have been trained to be polite, and my husband has taught them to thank me for cooking, but there was something different that was more sincere in this comment from this particular child, and I knew that this child was just happy to be eating some new food. There's just something nice about spring and spring weather. You want to break out the grill. A lot of times we're transitioning from heavy soups and stews, moving into lighter meals with more vegetables, and it's really exciting. But this year is a little bit different. As we get deep into March of 2021, it's hard to forget what March of 2020 felt like. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. This time last year, things felt really different. Things felt really heavy. They felt really uncertain. Nobody really knew what was lying ahead. I remember the day before spring break, my children, I said, "I don't think we're going to be going back to school after spring break for a while. If you have anything at school that you want, make sure you bring home all of your books, bring home any of your items like gym shoes and those types of things that you've left in your locker." And so my girls were walking out of school with backpacks full of everything from their locker, and a teacher looks at them and says, "What is with you?" They said, "Well, my mom doesn't think we're going to be going back to school after spring break, so she said bring home all our stuff." And the teacher just rolled her eyes at them. And my girls laugh and they say, "Wow, Mom, you were right." I didn't want to be right, but my mom gut just said, things are going to be different. This March, things are different. There's a little bit more hope. There's a little bit more joy. I have friends all across the country whose kids are going back to school. And what that means is that parents are having a little bit more time at home alone for the first time in a year. Last year, deep in the pandemic, I recorded an episode on the emotional burden of feeding your family. It's episode 75. If you haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen to it. It's a little bit raw. It's a little bit vulnerable, but there is so much in there that has resonated with so many of the listeners about how feeding your family is more than just getting dinner on the table. There are 1,000 little choices and 1,000 little things that we take into consideration as parents that can feel really heavy. This year, it's feeling a little bit lighter and it feels really good. And with all of the spring cleaning and the optimism that we are feeling, I feel like I just want to bounce right in and clean all my cabinets and empty out all of my pantries. But before I do that, I want to stop and take some time to reflect and really analyze where I'm at and where I want my family to go into the future. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that today so that you can maybe consider doing the same for your family as well. The first thing is that things are different this year than they were a year and a half ago. This year has been a year of constantly adjusting. And most of the time we're adjusting to external forces. We're adjusting to things that we didn't necessarily have any control over. And that meant things in our family life changed. Some things changed for the better, and some things maybe changed not for the better. So that's kind of what I'm talking about a little bit to detox from 2020 today. The first thing that I am doing and that I am going to encourage you to do is take a little time to reflect. When you get that first day where you have a large block of time to yourself because your kids are finally back in the school building, or maybe they are down at some neighbors playing and you have a little bit of time to yourself, I want you to take some time and I want you to reflect. What good things have come out of this past year for you and your family? And what are some things that maybe weren't the best? What are some of the habits that you want to keep? And what are some of the habits that you want to change in your family? For my family, one habit that I really have been working to keep is playing more board games with my kids. This time last year, about 4 o'clock every afternoon, my girls and I would all stop our work. We would all stop our distance learning, stop our school, and we would play a board game. And we did that almost every afternoon for weeks on end, and it brought a lot of joy. I have been trying to shut down my computer at 5 o'clock at night and really focus on my family for the rest of the evening. I've been trying to play board games with my girls at least 2 or 3 times a week because it brings us joy. And there's something really neat about the board game because our hands and minds are kind of occupied, and it allows us to have conversations that we wouldn't necessarily have if we weren't doing something else at the same time. We've had a lot of good conversations with my girls, especially this year. And that is one of the habits that I want to keep. I've noticed that my grocery cart is looking a little different this time of year than it did this time last year. Is your grocery cart looking a little bit different? It was about this time last year that I switched over to exclusively doing grocery delivery or grocery pickup. And for many months, that is what I did. I'm back at the grocery store now, but I learned some things during that grocery delivery and that grocery pickup about foods that we like, foods that we maybe bought too much of. It was too easy to click the button on the click list. When March hit and we were sheltering at home, I said yes to just about everything my kids wanted to put in the grocery cart. You want some Cheez-Its? Absolutely. Let me throw a box into the order. Ice cream cones? Totally. We got to a point where we were buying 2 boxes of sugar cones every week. And some of them we would eat with ice cream, and some of them we would eat just like as a cookie almost because my kids like the flavor of the sugar cones. That's one of those habits that I think we need to kind of let go a little bit of this year. That's kind of slowly faded away. But then there are also things that we hadn't bought before that are becoming new family favorites. One of those is frozen dark red cherries. When the shelter at home orders started to come upon Kansas, I knew that our family ate a lot of produce, and I was preparing for 2 to 3 weeks without being able to get out and go to the grocery store. And I don't know if you remember what it was like, but the grocery shelves were pretty bare. There were limits on the number of quantities of a particular item you could buy. So I was buying any kind of frozen fruit, frozen vegetable that I could get my hands on so that I knew that we would at least have some produce to last us for a few weeks. And one of the bags of produce that I ended up getting during that time was a bag of frozen red cherries. My family loves them. Actually, frozen fruit in general is something that we have been eating so much more of this year than we ever did before. I mean, I would usually keep a bag of frozen blueberries in the freezer and we would use them for blueberry muffins and that type of thing. I didn't regularly keep bags of frozen berries and mangoes and cherries in my freezer. but I started that last March and we have really been enjoying it. What are some of the foods that you have changed in your grocery cart? Are there foods that you wish you still didn't have in your grocery cart? Maybe like the Cheez-Its and the ice cream cones for my house. And are there foods like, for me, the dark red cherries that you have learned to love and you're going to continue buying, and it wasn't something that you bought before last year? Start thinking about those foods, and as you are trying to build new habits this spring is a really good time. There's a lot of good energy and it's a good time to start building new habits. One of the things that we are going to be doing is trying to buy more of fruits and more vegetables and buying less of the Cheez-Its and the ice cream cones. I have found in my experience is that it is easier to kind of break a bad habit by adding something rather than taking away something. So an example of that is, yes, I don't want to be buying 2 boxes of sugar cones every week, but the easiest way to kind of wean my family off of that, which I kind of slowly have, is I kept buying the sugar cones, but I bought more of something else. So I started buying more carrots and more varieties of fresh vegetables. And I started getting into the habit of cutting them and keeping a box of cut up fresh vegetables in the refrigerator all the time. And my kids started hitting that box more and more frequently. And so now this container full of carrots and celery and sometimes peppers and cucumbers, whatever veggies I happen to have, is a staple in my home. And they're not wanting to hit the ice cream cones quite as much because there's something else that's really convenient there that they actually kind of like. So as you start looking at your grocery cart and you want to start kind of cleaning it up per se, I don't think any foods are clean or unclean, bad or good. I kind of feel like food is food, but there are habits that I'm wanting to kind of break that we got into during the pandemic last year. And I am starting to do that by adding more of the things that I would prefer my family eats and slowly weaning off some of the foods that we got into the habit of eating over the pandemic. Another habit that many families got into during the pandemic was to have more regular family meals and to cook more of their meals from home. In many families, this was a really joyful thing, and in other families, it was a big burden on the main cook in the household. As you transition into spring this year, start thinking about how you want your family meals to look. As your families are getting a little bit busier, as things are opening up more, start looking at how you're going to prioritize family meals. Are you going to keep having family meals 7 nights a week? Or are you going to go back into your old habit of everybody hitting the drive-through, rushing from one activity to the next? There's a balance there. And I really feel like that's one of the lessons that the pandemic taught our family, is that it's okay to slow down, and maybe we were going too fast. So friends, detoxing from 2020, I want you, before you start cleaning out your cabinets, cleaning out your pantry, starting to find new recipes for spring, I want you to stop and kind of take a few moments and think about where you are, where you have been, and where you want to go. I know this podcast is a little bit different than what we've had in the past, but I feel like this year has been so intense, and there's so many emotions and thoughts that are coming back, especially as you start seeing posts from last year and we start hitting that time when we started to go into shelter at home last year, that there's a lot of things that we as parents and our children as well are going to need to process. In my family, a big piece of that is, how are we eating? How are we spending time together as a family? What are the foods that I'm bringing into my home now that I didn't in the past? What of these habits do I want to keep? And what of these habits do I want to let go? I cannot wait to connect with you in the Feed Your Family Tonight Facebook group and hear about some of the habits that you picked up over the past year. What are the ones that you want to keep? And what are the ones that you kind of want to let fade away? So join me in the Feed Your Family Tonight Facebook group, and we'll talk all about that this week. For now, friends, I hope you're doing well. I hope that you feel the hope and the joy this year. And if this past year has brought you heartache and grief in many different forms, know that we care about you here at Feed Your Family Tonight as well. And know that I know lots of us are still dealing with some of the effects of this past year, and we care about you. So know that you're seen, and I can't wait to hear from you as well. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Feed Your Family Tonight podcast with your host, Mariefiebach. If you like the show and want to know more, please visit feedyourfamilytonight.com. And if you'd like to help support the show, please leave a rating or review on iTunes or Apple Podcast. It helps spread the word that you can feed your family tonight.